Welcome to Wayne's World Studio. My name is Wayne, and today we're really fortunate to meet with Naina Park for some of her work. Amazing artist. She's going to showcase some of her work, and we're going to ask her how she started and what inspired her work. I'd like to know about how did you start it?
Well, I began just photographing friends.
Mm-hmm.
I have several young women that are close to me, family, friends, and they were my muses for a number of years. And at one point I wanted to create a deck of tarot cards, and I was going to photograph these. So I began to work with a makeup artist because I wanted them to be styled in a certain way. And that opened up another whole area of fantasy shooting. And the first makeup artist I was working with is Lauren Marler-Thomas out of Phoenix. And I made this book for her. These are all the images that we did together.
Great. That's how many years ago was that one there?
This was probably over the last 10 years.
Yes.
And she came up here a few times to Vancouver as well. So whenever we get together, we do something creative. And then that just began to create interest for other designers and stylists who wanted to do something like that.
So I know you're not a photographer. First, you were more into oil painting, more mixed media, and got into photography, and that really got you inspired doing fashion work. I notice it's all female. Is there any male model you work with, or this is kind of like?
I work with men as well. Sure.
I notice your work is really fantasy. Is that kind of idea you're going to that?
Well, I am very influenced by the Pre-Raphaelite painters, and so I think that whatever you do, whatever kind of art that you have done in your life, it translates into whatever media you do next, right? So it seems that I lean towards fantasy or surrealist imagery.
Want to tell us about your maybe workflow? How do you think about the model? You meet the model. How do you think about the shoot, the wardrobe? What would work for her? Is there a thought behind that?
It depends. I mean, if a model contacts me and wants to do something, then when I produce the shoot, I will contact either a stylist who will bring wardrobe or work with a designer. And so the garments tend to influence what the feeling of the shoot is going to be, if it's a period style or if it's more modern. And I like to bring together a team of different creative people, either people who are designing clothes, doing the styling, makeup artists. Mm-hmm. I ended up learning and doing my own hairstyling because it's not always possible to find someone who can do what I want. Mm-hmm. I like really elaborate and big styles.
Mm-hmm. I noticed you have some really big print. Can you tell us about the carbon print? They're really unique, and only 2 places around the world can print this.
Yes.
I'm sure this is going to be interesting for people to want to.
Color carbon printing is only done by two families in the world. One is the Frison family in France, which printed these, and several others that I have. And the other company is Art and Soul out of Seattle. The unique thing about color carbon printing is that it's the only archival way to make a color print. And they will, according to laboratory tests, last for 1,000 years without degrading. unless, of course, they're in a fire or a flood or something of that sort. But I would do all of my work as carbon prints if I could afford it. They're really lovely.
Have you been showcase your work in gallery?
I have. I am represented by 2 galleries. One is Method Gallery in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the other one is Artemisia in Chicago area.
Really interesting.
And occasionally I take part in group shows. I was just in the Hirschberger Theater group show called Balance. I was the featured artist there in Arizona.
Wow. Looks like you do a lot of traveling.
I like to travel, but I don't do much traveling lately.
Mm-hmm. You know, this is all still media. Have you planned maybe doing maybe a moving picture one or film like that? You know,
I would love to do video, and I've done some experiments with video, but it's interesting that you ask, because there's certain layering effects that I like to do with still images, and I would love to do that with a short film.
Yeah.
So maybe one day I'll have time for that.
We're going to talk about your metallic print. Can you tell us about the metallic print in your place there?
Because the Frisone prints are not very affordable, and the bad thing about them is that I need to sell them for quite a lot more than I would any other kind of print, and to educate the public, for them to understand why that is a better way to go and how it's more of a valuable piece for them to own. Most people don't want to go for a $10,000 print, right? So I often, when I do a gallery exhibition, I will use either Kodak or Agfa metallic paper. Mm-hmm. And with my particular kind of color work, I find that it adds a nice depth to the work. It just gives it a slight sheen.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I find metallic print, it has different look than the fine art. It has a different, I think every picture have a different use for it. You know,
Right.
on that. And can you tell us about your magazine? You've been published a lot of magazine, I know.
I have. I started working with Vigory Magazine, the editor, Judy Lake. She's a lovely woman. And I've been in Vigory a lot over the last few years. She's doing fashion mainly. It's fashion oriented. And then I began to work with Mamie. Lord Algie is the editor, and he always gives me a cover. And I love his style too. He's fashion based. Mm-hmm. And I work with Dark Beauty quite a lot. Topher Adam is the editor, and he is more fantasy oriented, but also fashion. He's also a designer.
Wow.
And then I've been in, various other magazines just here and there randomly, Passion and various ones that I just maybe will take part in once or twice. And then a little more than a year ago, I started Miroir Magazine with a friend of mine, Joe David. When we were both in our 20s, we did a small magazine in Seattle called City Kids, and it was a full-page visual ads that were all about the fun places to go in the city, like shops and restaurants and so forth. And it was a press run, and it was just given away free. It was very thin. And of course, we didn't have a backer, and we just barely made it each time, and we didn't make any money on it. And so many years later now, I reconnected with him. He's married, has a family, and I lived in other places, and so I did a shoot with him. It was for Helena Hawthorne, and we did it at his house. Like I contacted him and said, you know, I would love to do this this shoot for a designer that has sort of a Victorian feel, and I knew that he was well connected in the art community in Seattle, and asked him if he knew of a place where we could shoot. And he got back to me and he said, well, how about at my house? And so the nice thing about his house is that he has an amazing art collection, a lot of contemporary painters that I love, like Mark Ryden and Laurie Early. And so we did this wonderful kind of Victorian fantasy shoot, and the models were next to the paintings. Like this is Marion Peck as the wife of Mark Ryden, and this is Laurie Early. And then it was followed by a submission of Mark Ryden's work. And after that shoot, anyway, I brought him some of these magazines that I'd been in, and I said, well, what do you think about doing a magazine ourselves? Because now with print on demand, it's possible to do what we always had wanted to do when we were young. And he had never heard of print on demand, and he was surprised at the quality of it.
Yes.
Because in general, the color is good, and the paper is thick, and it's of course a little more expensive than you would get press run, but you don't have all that money up front to put out, you know. And so he agreed, and he's the editor-chief, and I am the one who kind of contacts the artists and curates the issues. And he used to teach at Cornish, which is a pretty famous arts school in Seattle, and he knew InDesign. So in the beginning, he was doing all the layout work.
Yeah.
And now we have a team of interns that are helping us. It's all a volunteer staff. So this last year, that has kept me very busy.
Yeah. Well, the magazine definitely has your style in there. You know, the painterly feel.
Well, the nice thing about Mirror is that every artist who is featured, we do a cover for them. So, for example, this is a Mark Ryden cover. And I had another cover. See, I had that cover for Surreal. And what the reason is because it's nice to have your work in a magazine, but it's so much more useful for the artist as a promotional tool if they're on, excuse me, if they're on the cover, you know. So we always do anywhere from 9 to 12 covers, depending on how many artists are in each edition. So I did a one-on-one workshop with Richard Sullivan, and he's in New Mexico, and he pretty much revived a lot of the alt process printing techniques by creating the chemicals that are needed to do those processes. And one of the things that wasn't possible to find anymore was carbon printing paper, and he redeveloped the process, and so he created these rolls of carbon paper that made it possible to do this kind of printing. I wanted to do them on this art paper, which is not something he'd had much experience with. He was usually printing on a slick paper. So we had a range of problems. I would say maybe 1 out of every 3 turned out, because it's quite a long process to create them. You get a lot of bubbles. In order to make the art paper possible to print on, you have to first coat it with layers of gelatin. And then you expose the carbon paper with the contact print. These are all, the negatives have to be the same size.
Wow.
It's just burned with an arc burner and then applied to the paper that has the gel.
So using paper as an emulsion.
Right. And so, as you can see, there's some irregularities, but those can all be fixed with a brush, an ink brush. And a lot of them were too dark. But again, the carbon process, these prints are, I mean, they will last for hundreds of years. I mean, they're very, I would say this is probably one of the most perfect prints that I got. There's a little bit of bubbling at the edge, but it has good tonality.
Can you tell us about the carbon print? For some of us are not familiar with the carbon print. So you
Well,
put the gelatin onto the print, so the camera itself is using this side
onto the paper.
Onto the paper.
You
So
you
photograph.
paint it on like a wet gelatin mixture, and you have to get it just the right consistency. And the carbon paper, it's just a roll of paper that has layers and layers of carbon built up on it. It's, you know, carbon is the same like what we have in our lead pencils, right? And then you take the negative, which has to be the size of the image that you want, and you place that over the carbon paper in an arc burner, and it then has to be hung and dried, and then processed and adhered to the paper that you have. Anyway, it's quite a long
Pretty interesting
procedure,
work, yeah.
and you never know what you're going to get. But if I had access to the materials and a place to work, I would probably do more of this. I love alt processes of all kinds.
It's hand-on, definitely.
Yeah. Now this is a platinum print, and I did a one-on-one workshop with Patrick Alt, who was known as one of the best platinum printers of our time. I mean, he was just incredible, and a wonderful photographer as well. He lived in California. He just passed this last year, but I was fortunate to be able to work with him, and these are also, you know, some of them are too dark, but they have a nice tonality. And then he also was teaching me how to do the cyanotype. And basically what cyanotype is the same process they use for making blueprints. And someone just told me recently that there's some kind of toner that you can use with them, and it makes them not blue anymore, but more of a black. I haven't done any more of them since I worked with Patrick. But here you can see the difference of the platinum and the cyanotype, using the same negative.
Definitely the left one, it feels a little more like cartoonish a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how color can make a difference. And then here's the save negative, the carbon and the sienna. I would say the carbon is probably one of the most luscious kind of feelings you can get. The depth of it is quite beautiful. Like even in the shadows, there's a lot of clarity.
And did you mention shot on film or?
Yes, yes. This is work that I did years ago, before I did digital. So a lot of duplicates here. This is a platinum print again in the sienna, so you can see.
Two different fields, that's for sure.
Yes. I would say my favorite alt process would be carbon. I like the look of it best.